Okay, so I'm David Shakun doing a new episode of our podcast and TV series here. And I'm delighted today to have as my guest Dr. Craig Polsfuss. And we're going to be taking what I expect to be a fairly deep dive into some questions that arise for me out of his personal history. Which is that he was one of the, I believe, earliest psychologists to be exposed to the work of Sydney Banks, and ended up becoming a 30-year three-principle practitioner. And then, this is the kind of surprising, very fascinating part to me, from previous conversations I've had with you, Craig. You related that you were good, you were doing the principles and motoring along, and it sounds like you always had kind of an openness to you, and you came across something else, another approach or modality that pulled you in very deeply to the point where you are now quite involved with bringing this work forth. And just to give it a name, it's called Higher Brain Living. I think what's interesting for myself and our listeners is, for the purposes of this conversation, is not the specifics necessarily of this approach that you're now involved with, though that I think that will be relevant. More the kind of like the phenomenon. Virtually every other three-principle teacher I know has had a movement in the opposite direction, and when they first touched in with the principles, whatever they were doing before, other techniques, modalities, they let those go, keep it real simple. This is the one approach. And a few, maybe if they were doing something else, they kind of do it lightly. They continue teaching some yoga classes or something. It doesn't evoke the same level of passion as the principles. So, and in our previous conversations, you talked to me about what you're studying now as having the potential to open up the level of insight that the principles do. So, with all that, I'd love to hear your take on this fascinating development in your life and
sure.
Many others. Yeah.
Well, thanks for inviting me to do this.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to share. What I realized very consciously early on in my life, when I had my own personal awakening, was all I wanted to do was go deeper into that and then share it with those. Not so much to put me on a pedestal, but to, the way I say it now is I realize I have the heart of humanity, and I think deep down we all do. So my heart, the nature of love is to give itself away, and I just want to share the best I've found. And when you talk about kind of something new coming across my path, it's kind of funny the concepts we live in, because as I say that, it strikes me, well, everything in every moment is new. Yeah. This moment has never existed in the history of the universe. And if we're on track with figuring it out, it's 13.8 billion years old. So it's all these new moments. And they're not just new. Each one is going somewhere that's more evolved. So there's new intelligence or depth of intelligence, new consciousness, new creative thought that's available in any moment. I mean, there was Sid going along consciously, to whatever degree, consciously or not, reflecting on his need for his next step in his life. And he hears something that comes into his consciousness, it completely captivates him and his whole life changes. And he has that heart that wants to share it too. Not in an evangelistic way, but, go out and to those who are interested. And it's changed and changing so many fields as those people who are three principles students know. So to me, my understanding of the principles always had that openness to it. That, I might get a hit, an insight, there's a feeling to it about a new friendship or a new business opportunity or an evolution of something I'm already doing. So I'm going along as a three principles practitioner, loving it, passionate about it. I'm not just doing it clinically as a psychologist and actually as a social worker, but I'm doing professional seminars and training. I'm actually published in 2 peer-reviewed professional journals, applying it to leadership and high performance. I'm giving interviews like this, and I'm just really want the message out that an answer like this or a resource like this exists. So I'm going along and I'm happy. And I start to feel, this is about maybe 8 years ago now, this feeling, I could call it a thirst or an energy of just, I really want to take my work to a higher level, to a level that will be even more impactful and reach more people. And by even more, I mean, I've got clients who, with traditional therapy would take maybe years, and maybe then they wouldn't even get anything good. And I, just like many, many three principles practitioners, I've got people turning around quickly in many, many cases, and in others not so quickly, but that growth and that health coming out and that understanding going deeper more and more and more. So kind of like you alluded to, I wasn't looking for anything else, but there are moments in our lives when mind puts something in front of our personal consciousness. And part of my growth in the principles is that that antenna up for truth were up more sensitive than Sid said, when you're looking for truth, it should be exciting. There should be wonder in it. So there's kind of that childlike awe that is in the background, kind of, or in the heart, whatever, and more at the surface, right? So I'm going along, and my heart, although my heart is in the three principles, my heart is really for my own awakening, further awakening, and helping humanity. It's not just to go along and now, I don't know, a worst case scenario, make three principles a religion or something.
Right.
So many things came across my radar, and some of them were, oh, good. And I, as a psychologist, I have to take a professional education to keep my license. And so I'm used to seeing things come across my desk. And one of them was this seminar or evening talk is what it was about this new development in neuroscience called higher brain living. And the actual founder of it, the developer of it, was going to be there speaking. And I thought, there was something different about it, because I'd gone to professional education about the brain, and there was new information, and it was all interesting and good, and neuroplasticity and all that stuff. Okay, good, and seeing a lot of correlation, that the neuroplasticity is a neurological or neuroscience way to talk about human beings can change, which we talk about all the time in the three principles, and consciousness can change. So I thought I'd go, because it sounded like not only was there new information, but there was an actual methodology that had come out that could actually, I don't remember how it was phrased at the time, but really take, like I knew, and many of us maybe in the three principles world have talked about how our brain is only using 5 or 10% of its potential, which is backed up by science, by the way. Little aside, some people make the mistake of saying we only use 5% of our brain. That's not true. It's the brain's potential that we're not using, right? So huge growth and awakening available psycho-spiritually with the principles. But it's like, oh, this guy's understood something about the brain. Well, let's just go here. And when I saw it, I was stunned. I could not look at it more. It was like, there is something very real here and very powerful. And it wasn't just what he said. He did a live demonstration with 2 people. And then I heard them talk about it, about their experience with it. And it just resonated. And my response was, oh my gosh, I need to look into this more. And as I did, it became more and more compelling, until I surprised myself. You know, I'm willing to go right deeper. And then the way is revealed as you go. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get trained in this. Well, and then of course I had those thoughts around that. Geez, I wonder what my 3 principles colleagues will think. But then I thought about people like, most of your audience may know about Dr. Bill Pettit, one of the first psychiatrists who embraced the principles. He still talks about and prescribes medication. Well, is he mixing the principles with medication? No. He's using the principles to inform his use of medication to serve people. And I love some of his talks where he'll talk about biology and psychopharmacology and the brain and how that all works. And he's coming from a 3 principles understanding. So I looked into it. It was like, oh my God, I had to get trained. And every step of the way, I just was amazed. And I saw on the one hand, this, and then eventually I personally experienced, and it was interesting. Well, it's a little of a side. I'll back up. So I just, how do I say this? When mind, and that sounds so impersonal as I say it, because it feels way more personal in a way. When mind says look, I want to look. When mind says move, I want to move. Even if it's not the way I thought I'd be going. And I'm willing to see and then correct. You know? If I got caught up in something then I can learn. But we're either evolving or we're learning, or some saying like that. So in my 5 to 6 years now of having been trained in this other modality, higher brain living, along with, of course, my work, I still use the 3 principles. Well, now, why would I do that? Why would I do both?
Yeah. Great.
Did I find something better? No, I found something else that, like if there was a breakthrough in psychopharmacology that used all natural, elements and could have 10 times the positive effect for clients, do you think Dr. Pettit would ignore that and say, no, all you need is the principles? No, he'd look at that. He doesn't have any validity. So I looked and I just saw the power. Now why the 2? I want to almost call, maybe the title of this interview, if you give it titles, would be like the neurology of insight. Beautiful. Because every thought, every experience, every state of consciousness, every level of consciousness has a corresponding neurology or neural pathways. The more deeper we see into the principles, it's integral. It's all the same energy in form, formless and in form. And that formless infinite intelligence expressing and creating and form. Well, there's 2 ways I like to say it. One is formulating what we see that appears. The other way, I think it's equally, if not more powerful for me, is the formulation is an extraction from what it already is and has and puts it into what it does. Now, from a scientific view, it seems that we as human beings are the most advanced formulation that mind, consciousness, and thought has come up with. As far as we know, the human body and the human brain in particular, and then the prefrontal cortex, which we refer to as the higher brain, is the most highly complex and sophisticated structure in the known universe. And it's sitting right here in our heads. The potential for understanding and thought and consciousness of that is virtually untapped. We're using 5 to 10% of it. Why?
Yeah, I hear, when I hear you, tell me, share your experience, it resonates completely. You're listening for mind, you're living the principles, and you're following, and this came up and continue to feel right. So now you're engaged in doing both. The deeper question that's emerging to me, you mentioned the form and the formless, is that relationship between the formless and form. And because, the principles talk about that relationship. They're talking about the formless with mind, certainly consciousness, and then how form or experience of form gets created through thought. And then it seems to me, the whole notion of wisdom, or the intelligence of the universe, sort of guiding us to navigate through form. So there is a lot of relationship spoken about between the form and the formless, and then Sid says they're one. So, and the principles, principal practitioners and books and so forth, they tend to keep, in general, I've seen so far, keep pointing back to the principles, and which, is beautiful, and it makes it very simple. And what I'm hearing has emerged for you is that your experience of the principles, is sort of pointed you towards a form or another form. And one thing to note is that the principles themselves, as formulated into words, are form. Right? Like any other form. I mean, they're words, they're a video. And Sid would say, one of the things I love from the beginning about Sid was he would say, hey, it's not the form. If my words don't match for you, come up with your own words. This is my best sense of how to express it. And so I think it's sort of built in for the principles almost to self-transcend, the way I've seen it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think, I haven't heard anybody question Bill Pettit prescribing medications. And maybe because, I don't know, they seem like a different domain almost, and yet when there are modalities that seem to be in a similar domain around awakening consciousness, I've certainly felt some confusion in myself, and maybe in others in the 3P world. And I think there's something, so I guess the question that occurs to me is, particularly what I've heard you say, that the higher brain living experience, from your point of view, can awaken consciousness, which to me another way of saying that is to bring insights into the nature of our experience, kind of from the neural level up. It's almost like from the form to the formless. Whereas what I hear about the principal insights, people are getting insights, and that's shifting their neurology. Am I hearing this right? This kind of a circular?
Yeah, I think I've got a clear, simple example that I want to share, but to just in a moment, but just to speak to that. In a way, I like that. It's like, because thought and formless and form, thought and matter are two sides of the same coin, so to speak.
Right.
So yeah, consciousness has a physical expression and structure, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's not limited to that.
Right.
And so the formless, so the principles are, in a way, this is limited, but as I see it, psychospiritual. And as you can't listen and start to get that feeling when you listen to the principles and those insights unless you relax the grip of the lower brain and start to hear and see from the higher brain. So we are changing our neurology by listening and deepening our understanding and grounding in the principles.
Right.
So what if the neurology of insight, huh?
Yeah.
So I hope it's a simple, clear example that came to mind as I was listening to you. Let's for this example's sake, say, look at the body as the means that the universe, mind, consciousness, and thought has created in form to experience, awaken in and as, and express its full self and potential. Okay?
Yeah.
So in a way, we are, as human bodies and individuals, receivers. And we've talked about that since the beginning, receiver mode.
Right.
I don't know, some of the early writings, and people maybe still use that language. So in the world where, three principles is big time in the world of addictions, what does our common sense say? Well, it says you're going to be able to receive this better if you're detoxed, and if you're in a well physically and mentally rested and receptive state. And we'll enhance this by we'll close the door so it's private in here and you feel safe. So we're doing things on the physical, environmental level that are increasing creating the conditions for awakening and healing and growth to happen. So what if you could do that with the brain? What if you could just understand the brain that increase the conditions for that listening, for that awakening? Higher brain living does not produce any awakening. It helps the system be more and more receptive to what's innately there and awaken to it. And you can think of it from a physical or physiological, okay, not only be detoxed from whatever you were addicted to, but what if you could put your brain in an optimal awakened listening state so that you serve its potential? Well, why would I not share that with people if it's really at a profound level? And I never say that higher brain living and the three principles are the same, because they're not. I never say you have to do both, because you don't. Both individually or separately have totally changed lives in amazing ways. But when you put the two together,
yeah,
I don't know what to say, except pretty powerful. So let's break that down a little, and then we'll let you respond. So people who come through higher brain living find themselves in healthier and healthier states, even physically, because the brain affects everything, right?
Yes.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And it gets more and more grounded because the neural pathways are being myelinated, if you know about that in neuroscience, okay? And that's becoming your new normal. Now, are they learning the principles? No. Well, in essence, how can you not? But as we mean them and articulate them in the three principles world, no. They're getting insight into thought and stuff, but it's just, there are many people around the world that spontaneously awaken, and they're in Buddhism, or they're in meditation, or they're in whatever, and they use a different language.
Right.
So when you bring the three principles, understanding and language in, which I've been able to do, because I was honored to be invited in by Dr. Michael Cotton, the founder of Higher Brain Living. I actually train Higher Brain Living facilitators just like I train three principles facilitators. And at those annual and biannual trainings, I've been able to teach the principles because, Michael's read Light and Gardner, and it just resonates, and we've had chats about it, right? So he's not opposed to it at all. In fact, he's let me bring, and the response is always, I love this. This gives me a language and kind of a perspective that helps take what I'm getting in touch with through higher brain living and kind of know it more, live it more, just like anybody who hadn't had higher brain living, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying to say three principles world, boy, you really need this. But if something about this attracts you, like it did me, it was like, what? I was like, what? Well, and I wasn't gung-ho. I was like, I got to look. And I looked and I looked and I looked and it was like, oh, okay. So if there's some attraction, it might rock your world if you're attached in your mind to, for instance, if I was attached to my concept of I've got to be embraced by the three principles tribe, I would be willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to get into groupthink, even if it's really good, high, helpful groupthink. I would do that, and I'm not hoping. That will happen in any movement with any group of people, as a whole or in factions or whatever. It's just part of the nature of human beings. So that has happened with some, and maybe it has happened with others. I don't know, but my devotion that I know and feel in three principles language is to the three principles, to the three principles. Now, it's another thing, because I think in the three principles world, we mash these two. Oh, you mean to what we teach and how we say it in the three principles community? No. Maybe yes, maybe no. The actual three principles is who we all are, actually. And the more you awaken to that, how can you not know it, live it, affirm it, express it?
In your own way.
And everybody, let's have room for everybody.
All the expressions.
Extracting whatever they can from
right.
us as a community and giving whatever they can at whatever level.
Exactly. So I'm picking up just the way you express the relationship. There's an intuitive sense of the dynamic. It's not for everybody. If it speaks to you, you follow it. That seems to be just natural and part of the principles. It's part of truth.
Follow your wisdom.
Follow your wisdom. Yeah. Now there is. I love that you brought up the analogy or the example of detox with addictive processes, because that's something I've thought of. I've discussed with other 3P folks, and it raises some profound questions. But first, kind of my kind of question about that is comes from this notion that insight or truth, as Sid would put it, is available everywhere, unconditionally. And actually, I spoke to a 3P colleague of mine who herself recovered from addiction, alcoholism specifically, and we talked about this notion that, well, would you, if you had a quart of tequila, would you be more or less prone to an insight versus if you had, were clear and free? And she said no. She said, or not necessarily is the way I heard it, because people, it's actually classic in the addiction community, this whole notion of hitting bottom, where the insight comes at a point where their body and mind system is probably in maybe the worst shape of their life,
Sure.
And they're still drunk even. I mean, in fact, that's when, I think in her case, that's when the insight, a life-changing insight came, three principles, when she was drunk.
Yep.
And so it's just fascinating to me, that phenomenon, and yet at the same time, it makes sense to me. We intuitively make people more comfortable. Like we said, close the door. Tend to this whole notion of making people feel safe. They can let their guard down.
Take their mind off other things.
Exactly.
So present and attentive.
Right. Well, maybe that's it. Though maybe. I mean, when I'm coming down to it, this question: are some conditions more conducive to insight than others? That's the question. Inherent.
I agree with your colleague that an insight can come in anytime, anywhere, to any degree.
Right.
But our common sense shows us that certain conditions produce better insights. The first example makes me chuckle. How many times did I go see Sid, and it was a nice tropical setting at a resort? Now, why was that? So we could leave it all behind, relax, and just be present and soak it up, right? Another example would be, so if you bring your client into your office and you give them a couple cocktails and you have loud music on in the background, maybe you have go-go dancers there, and it's like, okay, now let me tell you about the principles. The principles in act. It's like you want to eliminate the distractions and to meet people where they're at, as much as possible.
Yes, but what's occurring to me is it's there's something about the form that's very tailored and unique to the individual, because there could be somebody for whom that environment, the cocktail, go-girls, and the music, that could be just what's needed to get them out of their habitual, to kind of bust them out of their habitual thinking. As a therapist, you just get, this is what this guy needs, right? And so it's one way I look at it that's coming to me, see how this resonates, is that we live in this complex system, of things are not linear in life. And it may well be that for the great majority of people, a certain, more classical, calming environment, quiet environment would be better. But not for a given person. And that's where, I think the autonomy or the authority of inner wisdom for each individual, it comes into play. And why you said it, naturally, only do higher-brain living if you feel drawn to it. I mean, I've heard of people going to Sydney Banks lectures and getting nothing out of them. I mean,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so there's something where number one, it's always comes back to our own individual wisdom. And the other piece is, and that insights are available unconditionally. So I think that takes away from this notion people start to get attached to form. I think this is why it was so emphasized by Sydney Banks and many teachers, that insight is always available. It's not in a form, because we've been taught so much to look for wisdom in a form, right?
Yeah.
So,
we don't want the principles to be reduced to form, or reduced, it's brain function. Consciousness is produced by the brain. I never said that.
Yeah.
It's integral. Meaning they're inseparable because they're the same energy and intelligence.
Yeah.
Which is like, so the brain is not reduced to the mind, and mind is not reduced to brain.
Right.
They coexist as two forms of the same energy and intelligence.
Yes, it just occurred to me today, in fact, that thinking about the body or the brain, what is that? It's thought. I mean, everything is thought. The whole universe is thought.
And it's apparently the most highly organized form of thought that's manifest in the physical universe that we know of.
Yes.
Now, isn't that interesting? And what's the purpose behind that?
Yeah.
Why?
Right, exactly.
And if it's like, well, I know, that's that whole thing where you close that openness with, I know. with I. Well, I
Exactly.
in the small sense of it.
With I know.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me that part of what I'm so drawn to, there's a couple of reasons I'm so drawn to your experience and your insights with 3P and higher brain living. Number one, I have a background in body, mind practices, awareness, movement, dance, breath work. And I've seen what can shift, the openings in consciousness that can come just from those practices. What happened for me with being exposed to 3 principles, it just expanded the possibilities where before I was attached to those forms because I had some incredibly mind-opening experiences while doing dance or movement or being in nature. That for years, that was my thing. I structured my life around maximizing the time I was spending in nature and dancing and moving. I taught classes and it was cool, and yet I was feeling often not at home in the universe. It's like,
So am I right? You gave yourself to it and you squeezed everything out of it you could. And so that's good because then
good.
you realized this is what it has and this is what it doesn't have. And then you opened up.
I opened up. I was exposed to the principles. It was such a relief to realize I didn't have to do anything, to feel okay and be okay. And yet I was still drawn to teach these movement nature classes, but now I had the principles to kind of give it, to kind of make it more, multidimensional, more real.
Yep. It takes it to a new level. Just like Sid would talk about, stay with your religion. You'll go back into your scriptures and you'll see the truth of it and it'll come alive for you.
Yeah.
If you're inclined to stay in your religion. It's like,
I know.
The 3 principles are not in and of themselves, to me, they're not a way.
Right.
But in the 3 principles in motion or in action are a way.
Right.
And you could just that, you could call it flow.
Beautiful. I don't love that because really the 3 principles are not a way, they're a description of reality, of universe and human experience. So as such, and they're the lightest of form. That's what I love about them. We talk about, the computer development now, we're talking about lightweight, software. Like the principles are the lightest weight expression of truth that I've seen. They're almost not there. 3 short statements, no extra stuff, baggage. Like Sid used to say, well, he met people who said, well, I have 9 principles. He was like, geez, 3, that's plenty. It's all you need. And it keeps it light so we don't get caught up and bogged down. And with that, because they're so lightweight, to me, it's just a natural to bring, and we already are bringing in our own unique expressions of our truth as we see it, as 3 principle practitioners. I mean, in how we speak, the cadence of our voice, how what the words we use. Some teachers emphasize one aspect, the principle of thought. Other ones talk about more the who we essentially are. To me, that's beautiful. We get touched in different ways. So why not allow that expression to really be full, not just through words, but through through movement or touch, or like in higher brain living, I know there's some kind of touch or energy component.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like
music,
anything.
French, English,
Right. Yeah.
Mathematics and science. I love it when I
Me too.
see it there. Yeah.
And people are touched that way. Some people hear the scientific analogies and it wakes them up with the principles that works better. And I guess this is what it's coming to me. We are already, all of us, expressing its truth, broadcasting it in all these different modalities already. It just looks like within the 3P world that people are doing something kind of, around talking or writing, But the truth is, we're already using all these channels, and I guess maybe what some of us are drawn to is like I'm really drawn to opening up the playing field. Let's express it in so many ways, and one way could be, the special kind of touch, that energetic touch, certain points in the human energy system, I see it's happening in higher brain living. Awesome. You know, by the way, one of the classic examples of enlightenment in Buddhism, you may have heard this, was a student who went to an enlightened master and for teaching, and all the master did was hold up a flower, said nothing, and the students, according to the story, had instant enlightenment. They're holding up a flower. So it's like, it's everywhere, like Sid said, and so that's kind of how I'm seeing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if to the listener or even to you,
Yeah.
This next flow from me,
Yeah.
you'll see the connection. But I think part of what was brewing in me, the way I said it at the beginning of our talk about taking things to the next level, it just struck me listening to you that, you know, Sid would talk about how one insight can totally change your life.
Yeah.
Yes. But then he said, but do you realize you can live in a state of insight and ultimately an unbroken flow of insight. And both of those have a corresponding neurology.
Yes.
What is the neurology of insight? Oh, cool, powerful. And we're knowing more and more about that and how to facilitate that. And then what's the neurology of an unbroken state of insight, ever expanding, evolving? That's a compelling question to me. Maybe to others in the three principles world it's not, but I love it.
I love it too. And, you know, I want to say that it strikes me that the different forms that may spark somebody to insight, the way I said it, you know, it could be anything or anyone or any form. And that's true. On the other side, I think there's another truth, which is that some forms are more conducive at a given state of time, you know, development of the universe, more aligned for more people to open that up, let's say on the level of neurology. So, I mean, let's make an analogy to nutrition. Okay, so for the body is structured in a certain way. It's evolutionarily adapted to certain kinds of foods. That's what it knows, and tends to do better, as we know, on whole foods, etc., less processed. And does that mean that a person couldn't be incredibly healthy on eating a less than ideal diet, or even from some point of view, relatively unhealthy diet? No, in fact, there are many counterexamples in both directions. And so still, you know, there's something there that certain forms like food tend to help people feel better in general. Right. And so it strikes me the analogy is true with neurology, that why higher brain living, for example, may be compared to just somebody taking a walk, it may be a little more targeted to facilitate, right?
Right. I think rightly so, we should avoid for sure saying or implying, oh, change your nutrition and you'll get your mental health.
Right.
Now, of course, somebody changing their nutrition might glance over at the guy with the flower and get enlightened, you know. But generally, you don't look to the form, right? However, I mean, actually, you can look to the form. It's the hard way and the long way, but it will produce enlightenment because you'll experience more and more and more the agony of it, the emptiness of it. It doesn't fulfill. So as you look within, you feel right. More and more of the fullness and the freedom. So that's the direct, easier way is inside. But that.
But I guess what I was trying to get to with that analogy is, I think there's a lot of evidence now that improving nutrition reduces anxiety, it reduces depression, quiets the mind. I mean, there are substances, even in more conventional foods, that agitate the nervous system, create inflammation. And, we can say that that's may not be as conducive as somebody who's more cleared out, like detoxed. If we want to take the example of alcohol, maybe that's a more clear example for most people. That for most people, if somebody is not drunk, they're going to hear better.
Yep.
Not always.
Yep.
So I'm just what I'm trying to do is to say, not just say that, I'm trying to kind of encourage no question. And the question is, why higher brain living? Is it just kind of equally as good as anything? I mean, you seem to be feeling, from my conversation, that higher brain living is, how to put it, has a kind of a special ability to awaken the neurology, to shift the neurology. That's why you're drawn to it.
Yeah, I would tweak that a little and just say to help the neurology get in its innately healthy flow or state so that it's more conducive to awakening.
Yeah, it's conducive.
Yeah, like maybe a chiropractor, kind of a more down-to-earth example. Something's off in your spine, they do some adjustments and it's like crack, 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 and now the system is going to flow, and then any symptoms of it not flowing are likely to improve or go away. So it's kind of like that. It doesn't create the healing. It allows the innate health to, just like we do in 3 principles. We don't produce innate health and wisdom and insight. We create the conditions, and it just shows up.
A lot of what we do is take away barriers to people. The unnecessary thinking, the illusionary beliefs. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that makes sense to me. So, bring us down now to a very personal or level for the audience to how to kind of consider what we're talking about. And for me too, it's like, when you're hearing about something like higher brain living, and there are other things too that I think we're living in a time of incredible evolution of available forms to help us move forward, including the 3 principles. And so, like, when we hear something and people, rave ecstatic about it, how wonderful and miraculous it was for them, I notice in myself, it can set up a desire, kind of like, oh my God, I need that. It's out there. I'm missing out if I don't do it. It's like, it starts to get me, start to feel kind of outside in. It's no longer, you know what I'm saying? Which feels like the opposite direction, which I want to, how can we leave our audience with a sense of how to hold this with?
What does that say? I mean, what strikes me when you say that is, there's the answer. Well, that tells me I'm not feeling the answer, and that I'm still looking for the answer, or for the answer deeper. So either my understanding of the principles has to go deeper. Well, my understanding of the principles has to go deeper. Now, is it through a traditional 3 principles modality, conversation, teaching, blah, blah, blah? Or is it because I finally go, you know what? My body's been telling me forever, get in shape, change the way you eat, change my relationships. Oh, my common sense and wisdom.
Right.
Like it's interesting when you said it, because when I saw higher brain living, it wasn't like, oh, there's the answer. It was like I said to you, I have to pay attention to this.
Okay. It's being drawn into. It's not a deficit mode.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
It's an evolution versus but I think we should be honest with ourselves that we don't just take that on mentally. Oh, I've arrived and now I'm never going to come from a deficit.
True.
No, if that's where you're at, admit it, and then let that motivate you to open up, get more humble, open up.
Yes.
Follow that feeling, that inner guidance the best you can.
Yeah. So if I settle down a little bit now, getting towards the end of our this conversation, at least I feel a certain joy about the prospect of doing more.
Mm.
It, what I sense inside is more of a feeling of wholeness is what I'm getting.
Oh, nice.
A feeling of like, yeah, the simplicity of the principles, it is within me. I'm led and drawn to principles being expressed in many ways, including through the body, including through neurology. And it's kind of this interplay or dance, maybe perhaps, of, in this case, between the neurology and the formless and the insight, and or it could be, yeah, whatever form, hybrid living for one person or something else for somebody else. But it's kind of place of wholeness where we're not like neither clinging towards form nor pushing it away. And
I like that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And of course, and as you said, of course, we may cling, we push away, it's okay. But at least it's not, we don't have to come from there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. So that, to me, it's more this place of open, wholeness, openness, possibility
Mm-hmm.
that, like, another way to experience what I've felt so far, and maybe there's another dimension here.
Yeah. And you'll know if you,
Yeah.
if you're, see if you're clinging to your idea of the principles out of a fear of losing them or something,
Yeah.
look, then you're operating out of fear. And,
Right.
and don't worry. I mean, if you take a step out, you'll know it, you'll feel it, you'll feel the difference, and you'll feel and you'll see what comes of it. And to me, those are always the two things that tell you if you're on the right track or not, so to speak. The feeling of it and what comes of it.
Exactly.
And the feeling is either on track or off, or maybe I don't know. And then you hang out there, you know.
Right.
And then what comes of it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. The simplicity, we're back to the simplicity, which I think many of us have loved in the principles.
Mm-hmm.
And we can still have that feeling within this diverse, wondrous world of all kinds of forms.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're drawn to, like you're saying, we're not or not knowing, and still feel simple about it.
Mm-hmm.
Trusting. So, yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad to land in that place with you, Craig, today.
Thank you. It's been wonderful, and it feels more than satisfying. It has that kind of alive feeling to it for me, like more like expanding or some that direction to it. So
yeah, beautiful. All right. I wish you a wonderful day, and until our next meeting.
Thanks to you and all your viewers.